Welcome to the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast with me, your host, Julie Swan, where each week we dive in to discuss all things dog breeding so you can build a breeding business you love, producing dogs that fulfill their owners' dreams. I believe you can have an honest dog breeding program that also pays the bills. So throw those pods in your ears while you're cleaning kennels. I'd love to join you. You guys are in for a treat today. Today we have my very own husband, Bill. Bill's going to talk to us today about working with contractors and how to find a good contractor for construction, of course, and just things, considerations that we need to have kind of in our mind when working with contractors. So, Bill, thank you so much for coming on. I know everybody's been excited to meet you.
Well, thank you, Julie.
All right. So, for people who don't know, can you give us a little bit about your background, kind of what you've done in construction, just so that people can kind of understand where you're coming from?
I started in construction just out of high school, building residential homes, obviously as a laborer, as a grunt, basically. And so I learned from the ground up. And then, long story short, I went into owning my own business in around 98 in Colorado, building homes. Excuse me. Just framing mostly. And then was a framing subcontractor from Casper, Wyoming to Denver, Colorado.
Yeah. And if for those who aren't familiar, can you explain like what framing is?
Framing would just be the wood structure of the home that everything else attaches to, sits on the foundation.
Yeah.
So yes, put up many homes and seen many different versions of people's dreams and built them for them. So it's been quite a journey over the years, and then went from there into general contracting in Arizona and still kept framing. And also done remodeling, many aspects of commercial from ground up, remodel, commercial remodel, metal buildings, kind of name it. I've been involved with it or done it. So
Yeah, exactly. And so when people are, because you mentioned general contracting, for those who aren't familiar, can you explain like the difference between like a specialized contractor and a general contractor?
well, there's subcontractors which specialize in certain phases of construction, and the general oversees. He's like the project manager, so to speak, and it varies from residential to commercial. But the general oversees the whole project, and then you can get into more detailed aspects of the project management from the architectural aspect, where the architect is more involved and kind of dictates how the build goes, and the general kind of pieces it together over
Okay.
the course of the project. So the general oversees everything. He kind of needs to know it from A to Z. The
Okay. So would
project,
you,
from the blueprints to basically from the planning, the blueprints to the permitting, execution of the project, all the way through the end where you hand the keys to the customer and walk away.
that makes
So
sense.
it's very vast. It's a lot to manage, and I just enjoy the aspect of all the parts that come together to make the project what it is. So you see something standing at the end of the day or the end of the project, and it's pretty neat to be able to drive by something and say you built that. But the subcontractors specialize in the like the plumbing, the electrical, the HVAC, and you got your concrete guys, you got your framing crew, or if it's steel stud, you got drywall crew. So you have the roofing crew, everything to make the project come together.
Okay. So, well, when you start, so if somebody's starting a project, are they generally going to go to a general contractor, or do they start with the architect, or where would be the best place to start?
Most people will find somebody who can facilitate the project, and typically they'll find a general contractor, because if you want to as yourself project manage, it's possible, but people don't really understand how much goes into the pre-planning execution of the project. And a lot of people watch a lot of do-it-yourself TV and think it's really easy, and you just call this guy and this happens, and you call that guy and this happens. But there's so much in between that they don't show on those shows. I've actually been around those shows multiple times, watching them do some really high-end custom builds up in Colorado, up in Wyoming, and it's a lot. As you know, they say TV is designed to show the best of it all. You don't see all the behind the scenes stuff that makes it happen. It's unfortunate because most customers, most clients don't understand to the degree and what they're getting into when they try to do their own project. And obviously the size of the project matters. I mean, if you're just putting up a wall or something, you can kind of hire somebody to do that for you. But when you're doing a ground up construction, if it's existing or if it's going to be a new build, you got to come into it with the understanding of everything you have to do. You got to get with your county or city, figure out all the stuff that they need so that you can get that done on your plans for permitting. Codes, you got to understand your local building codes. And then if there's engineering involved, then you have to bring in an engineer. So there's a lot of other facets that come together to make a project happen. Obviously, the larger the project, the more involved. The smaller, not so much.
Do you find that when customers come to you and they call you and they're like, hey, I have this project, do you find they generally have a good understanding of the scope of it, or no?
Usually they don't. Commercial is really bad with dealing with people that work in different industries and they just want you to come do something, and then you start going through the process and they just get the deer in the headlight look like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And they usually get lost about 1 or 2 minutes into explaining to them everything that's got to happen. You get riddled with the details, but the details is what makes or breaks the projects. When that's overlooked, typically when things are missed, it's going to cost the general money, or it's going to cost the customer money down the road. One way or another, the customer is going to be paying for it, whether they know it or not. And it's unfortunate because experience is priceless in this industry. A lot of the newer, younger generation coming up seem to miss. They don't have the years in the industry, the experience, and nor have they perfected a craft. And by what I mean by that is if they were a plumber by trade, an electrician, a framer, a roofer, there's a certain amount of hours and years that go into becoming what you would consider a master at that. And in some trades, you have to get a license for that. Electricians are called journeyman electricians. Same thing with plumbers, HVAC techs, and you pay for what you get, unfortunately, these days. Some guys, some generals, I should say, some contractors will come in and kind of sugarcoat it for you and tell you it's going to cost X amount of dollars. They'll lowball it, but in the end, they're going to change order you to death with all the extras, and they'll get their money out of it. And so you think you're getting a good deal, but in the end, you would have paid the same as if you would have went with one of the other bids. And what I find with that is they're not disclosing things they know, especially an experienced general contractor knows what goes into a project. So he's purposely not disclosing things just so he can get the job. And he might do it a little cheaper, but usually you're going to find there's going to be a lack of quality at the end. And it's hard for some people to gauge that unless they've done projects before, and it's really the quality of the project gets compromised, is I guess the way I could put it.
Would you consider like putting up like a breeding facility in the backyard? Would you consider that commercial or residential? Like what kind of contractor should somebody find?
Well, if it's a business, it's commercial, period, but it's that gray area where it's small enough that it's more of a hobby type of thing. Now, if you're going to put up some massive structure for multiple dogs in a facility that's got people coming to it to manage it, then you're going to be more along commercial stuff.
That makes
But
sense.
of course, that's a larger scale project. Most breeders, obviously, from my standpoint and my experience now, it's going to be more of a smaller, self-contained, well-maintained area that they can manage, kind of like hobby, so to speak. So it's going to be something of a smaller scale. So it's going to be along the lines of residential when you go to speak with the contractor.
That makes sense. It's kind of like building a specialized barn in a way.
And that's the thing. There's no single layout for it. It's got to cater to your needs. It's got to fit in the area that you're going to use. And a lot of people will have this vision of just building something that fits what they need at the moment, but they don't think about scalability, adding on to it at a later date or being able to rearrange it to facilitate more litters, whatever it is that you're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking for a long time, I only had ever 2 litters at a time. And then all of a sudden you get 4, and it does really change the dynamics. And I can see your face. Yes, you love this.
Yes, it does. I've experienced this multiple times. Unfortunately, they don't come into heat on schedule, and doesn't fit into our nice little planned life. So
Sometimes, right?
so yeah, I think what a lot of people run into is when they're trying to do something, they have an idea, and this is how we all operate. We have an idea, it looks easy, let's go do this, execute it, and then you start running into all the obstacles.
Mhm.
If you're trying to do something in your backyard and you have neighbors, you got to bring that into account. Are they going to be neighbors that are going to support you in what you're doing, because you're going to have this new structure back there, more animals? Or do you need to build some kind of living fence, put up trees so that it covers the area that you're going to go ahead and put the new construction in, so your neighbors don't see that? There's a lot of things to consider when you're going to
Mhm.
build something. Everybody's going to see it, they're going to know it. Is it going to fit? Is it going to be usable after I build it? Some people build stuff and then they're like, wow, I should have done this and this differently, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunately the learning curve that we all experience when you do something. The first time you do it, you have this great vision and it looks great in your head and you can imagine it. And then when you get it done, you're like, wow, we need to adjust this. This isn't going to work for what we really want. And that
Yeah.
all comes down to, you know, figuring out the area you're building it in, and obviously the region you live in, the sizes that you need, and then
Mhm.
getting a contractor or a consultant, because a lot of people will consult on the stuff to help you kind of manage and be efficient with your build also.
Mhm.
Asking questions is the best thing you can do. There's so many options for building materials and ways to take care of things when you're building a kennel. People just probably don't think about the heating and cooling aspect of it, the insulation value of it, the drainage aspect of it,
Yeah.
what's under, do you have plumbing? Do you have a septic? How are you going to drain this? How are you going to clean this? And
Yeah.
the smell that you're going to have to deal with, if you have multiple dogs, and in the management of that facility. On top of it, the roofing, do you want to go with metal? Do you want to go with just a flat roof? Where's that water going to drain to? So if you're doing it in your backyard, you're kind of in a confined space, so you really have to think this stuff out. Do you want to elevate it? And then if you're
Yeah.
whelping dogs in it, then you have a whole different aspect. You got to worry about the disinfecting and the keeping the dogs kind of segregated to protect the puppies and from getting anything that can be harmful to them, and keeping them away from the other dogs. And so there's a lot of things to consider, and the best thing to do is to sit down and write it all down and start analyzing it in more like an outline,
Mhm.
and do some research on what it is. Do you want it to match your house? Do you care what it looks like? What materials you're going to use? So there's a lot of stuff to really consider when it comes to
Yeah.
putting in a facility.
And I think like finding a good general contractor, that's actually kind of what you're doing is you're hiring someone, or you could do a consultant. And sometimes I find the architects are hit or miss with how much they anticipate. They have a lot of good knowledge, but sometimes they miss stuff.
Yeah, you got to think, what you do for a living versus what they do for a living. They're trying to throw out ideas,
Yeah.
and some of their ideas come from experience. Some of their ideas are just maybe this will work for you. But again, it's talking with other people who've gone down this path to see what works for them, and see, kind of look around and understand it, and then understand the caliber of dog you have
Yeah.
also. So if you have dogs that like to jump and climb, do you put a roof on it? Do you put some kind of Constantine wire that looks like, you got a prison there, so it's going to be aesthetically appeasing also, you don't want the dogs to be injure themselves either, if they're because I know our dogs they're crazy and they don't have any concept of slowing down. They just go. So the general contractor is a critical aspect if you're doing something of a larger scale. I would say something in your backyard, if you're just doing a couple of dogs, it's something you can kind of take on as your own project, and you can do enough research. You can find out what works, make a couple of calls, ask some couple of questions, and you can put up something relatively nice. The costs can range, from something do it yourself to as much as you want to pay. It really does pay to get a multiple views, or I guess you could say multiple
Estimates,
people to
maybe?
look at, estimates to look
Mhm.
at, because you want a price check. General contractors, subcontractors, the prices could be all over the place. I've experienced this throughout decades in construction.
Mhm.
I know what prices should be, and what's respectable. And, I know what guys should get paid, what the job should entail, the details of it. So I can kind of tell if a price is in line. But you'll get some people that are clueless and they'll just throw numbers out there. And if you take it, they're happy, but they have so much work, they don't care. So it kind of makes it worth their while to fit it into your schedule.
Yeah.
And it does pay to do your homework on the general contractor. Make sure if his licensing involved for his being a general, like in Arizona, we have to be licensed. It's a checks and balance system, which is good because people can go on the website and check and see if you have any, marks against you, or you've had problems with customers or customers have problems with you. It goes both ways. It's kind of a good thing because it's so easy to get taken advantage of in this industry. I've seen it time and time again where people will give half down because that's kind of a normal thing to get the project going, to get your space allocated or saved for their schedule.
Their schedule.
And they'll take the money and run. And it's really hard. You're out at that point. They're not going to give you your money back. You probably will never see them again. So, you can go the route of going the cheapest and trying to get the best deals. And I would say more so than not, you regret that down the road. So sometimes, you do your due diligence and it pays off and really pays off for you. So
how would you advise someone looking to hire a contractor on what they should get in that conversation, or how that should go for them? How do you feel out contractors and know that they're going to be what you need and they're going to guide you and not hold back?
So it's really important. It's an interview process. It's a courting process. So just as much for them as it is for you. If they want to work with you, number one, if you want to work with them, just the initial face-to-face meeting is very important, because you can tell, you can see by their appearance who they are, how they speak, do homework on them, look them up, see what kind of jobs they've done, if there's reviews. Word of mouth is a huge one. I really never had to advertise in decades of being in business unless I've chosen to, because I'm specifically wanting to do one thing. Everything's been word of mouth. It's the best advertising in the world, and it's free. So if you do a good job, people are going to refer you. And in this world we live in, trust is the number one key here. Somebody recommends you is because you did a good job for them. And so they can already have faith that you're going to probably do a good job for them. And then it's really important to have at least something written up, drawn up as to what you want. Have an idea. Don't leave the door open, because there's just so many ways this can go. They can tell you it's going to be simple, easy, cost X amount of dollars. If you leave the door open, they can go with whatever they choose. And like I said, the sky's the limit. You can build it any way you want with any type of material you want. But it's really important to know what you want so that you can tell them and they can bid it accordingly. And it's really important to have that, because when you get to construction, there's always the gray area. The plans will show the way this structure's got to be built, and they'll give you the measurements, it'll tell you everything, but the details in the materials that you want to put on, what are you going to need for those materials to fasten to the walls? That's going to facilitate what you want for keeping things clean, no mildew. I mean, like if you're in a really wet, humid area, you're going to have a problem with mold. So you want to be able to make sure things are clean, and wood can rot. So you're going to have to use treated lumber. If you're going to use a steel structure, you got to make sure that it can be dried out and not a lot of water is getting to that to rust it. Water mitigation against certain types of building materials is important, especially if you're having to clean the facility all the time. What kind of materials you're going to use on the wall so you can wipe them down and sterilize them, and there's lots of avenues to approach there. What kind of sealing are you going to use? Are the chemicals going to be harmful with the off-gassing for the dogs or the animals? That's another thing to consider. Everybody's bought into the whole new green movement thing, and you really need to do your homework on the chemicals that's in a lot of this green movement stuff. The off-gassing is actually pretty detrimental, especially in enclosed areas. So you got to be careful of that, the type of paint you use, any type of chemicals.
Yeah, anything that comes in contact with the dogs.
Yeah, ventilation is huge. Dogs like to chew on things. So if they chew on this material, are they going to get sick? Is it a fiberglass material? Are they going to be able to chew on it? Like FRP is a really good wall system that you see in a lot of commercial bathrooms. It's that shiny stuff that feels smooth and it's actually fiberglass and it wipes off real easy and it's clean, but then how does that join together? So that becomes a sticking point, like concrete's very porous, so it's going to absorb a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So do you coat the floor, and what do
Right.
you use to coat the floor, and what's the best procedure and process to do this? So doing
Mm-hmm.
your homework pays off in dividends. It's great, and it can make or break your facility, because the less time you have to spend cleaning and managing the actual facility itself to make it acceptable for the animals. Time is money in business, we all know that. So the least amount of contact time you have equates usually to more time to invest, further your business, and it's money. So
Yeah.
if you're spending hours after hours constantly keeping a facility and managing it, it's like you got to hire somebody to do that now. What's the
Yeah.
easiest way to get in there, pressure wash it, sterilize it, and get it ready for the mother who's coming in, or just to put board dogs or put more dogs in.
No, that
And
makes
then,
so much sense. So
mhm.
you're suggesting that it's definitely worth it to know the materials you want. If you have a list of kind of, this is the layout I'd like, this is the design of what I think is going to work, this is the materials I'm looking to use. And so maybe coming into a contractor, kind of that interview session, if you will, saying, this is what I'm thinking. And do you find when people come to you with that kind of detail work, are you more willing to work with them?
I do. I like to work with people that have an idea of what they want
Mhm.
and give me some kind of concept and have a vision. Now I've been doing this long enough, I can pretty much figure it out pretty quick what they need or what they want. That's just
Mhm.
years of experience. And then you're going to have the contractors who really just, they're not really interested. They just, let's do the job, get done, get out, get paid, and get out.
So when you're
So
talking with them, what is that? What is the difference in
you can
how?
just, you can tell by asking them questions, are they giving you the feedback you're looking for? Or are they just very short answered, like, I need 4 walls and a roof and a concrete slab. Cool. I can knock that out real quick. It's going to be X amount of dollars. And then they're down the road. And then there's the contractors who come in and they ask you the questions, and you're going to know the questions because you're going to start asking details. It's all in the details, and try to understand what it is that you want and what are you doing here, what are you trying to accomplish. There's many avenues. Maybe you do just want to have them come put up the structure and you're going to do all the other work, and you can set up the contract accordingly, so it saves you money if you're looking to cut cost of using subs, because you can hang the wall material you want to use, you can insulate it. You have a friend who is a contractor that's going to help you. There's many ways to negotiate what you need and what you want. You just want to find somebody who's going to have your best interests in mind, not just worrying about the dollar amount at the end.
Yeah. When they're asking questions, the contractor should ask questions that clarify what you're explaining, so that almost like the contractor's thinking through it in their head and maybe noticing, oh, we have to make a decision here. Oh, this could be a problem. And then coming to you to figure out which way, would address it in a way that would be satisfactory, maybe for the dogs or for your cleaning
Yeah,
kind of
I mean,
process.
it's like anything else. You have salesmen, then you have people who care. You go to the car lot and you got the salesman who's like, this is just nice and shiny and pretty, you should buy it. And then you have the salesman who's like, well, what are you trying to do? You got 5 kids or you got 2 kids? What is it that you want? Do you want a sports car? Do you want an SUV, a 4-wheel drive? And so you can see the difference in questioning right
Yeah.
away. You have the salesman approach, is he just trying to get it? And the other thing is that I find some of the smaller contractors you can go with, they're not worried about trying to sell you on a big job. You'll have more control with them because you're dealing with the actual owner, and therefore you're getting a good job, because again, word of mouth, especially in a smaller community, word of mouth is huge. If you go along and you do a bunch of bad jobs, nobody's going to recommend you, and word gets around, because you'd be surprised how fast it gets around. So what I find is the smaller mom and pop businesses, the guys that they're busy because they run everything. They have an attention to detail. They care about their end result. And what you find is you usually get a better product out of that. And it's, if there is a problem, that's the other thing. If there's a problem with something, you can get a hold of them to come fix that or take care of that. Or if you want to change something, it's not such a
Yeah.
big deal. A lot of the bigger companies, it's like you go to the dealership and you put your car in, you're just a number there. But you go to a smaller shop, and you're dealing with somebody, usually the owner in a lot of cases, that, cares, and they're going to remember you when you come back. And so you'll really see that dynamic in the business. And that's what I found is like, I just keep things pretty more personal with my customers. They tend to become friends afterwards. And like I said, it's like I can go back 20 plus years and I've done projects for people. Obviously we have a customer like that ourselves. So I
Well, it was
built
so
this
funny because
house. Yeah.
yeah, one time we had a guy, I was boarding his dog and he was dropping him off and he was talking about his project. And it
You
was
like
right when
this
we
house.
started, we were just dating. Yeah. And I said I was dating a new guy and I mentioned that you were in construction. He was like, "Oh, what's his name?" And when I told him your name, he was like, "He built our house." And I was like, "Oh, I sold you a dog." And we ended up getting a metal building built out of it, which I thought was so funny. But he loves working with you. You're his number one.
So I mean, and I did a lot of the work on that house myself, and I met him. It was one of the first houses we'd ever built, and and it pays off the personality. You can, you know, as you get older in life, you can read people pretty easily. It's
Yeah.
easy to pick up little nuances and
Mhm.
things, and you can tell if they're genuinely engaged or if they care, or if you're just like, whatever, I'm just doing this
Yeah.
because you called me. And you have a desire and a vision, and it's important that that contractor buys in on that,
Yeah.
and he's going to ask you questions probably from one end to the other of to find out what you really want. Like he'll throw
Hmm.
something really random out there and you'll be like, it's not what I want, and then he can go ahead and zoom in on exactly what you want to make sure it's what you
Sure.
want. Everything looks good in your mind until you start putting it down, and even on paper, things look
Yeah.
perfect on paper, but as soon as you start building it, you start to realize we need to adjust things. And then in that, how much of a adjustment is it going to be? And so some contractors don't like any surprises and they get frustrated and charge you accordingly. So it
Yeah.
really
I
helps
do.
to have all your ducks in a row.
Yeah. I mean, because I know you've expressed, you come, somebody contacts you and they just kind of like word vomit this like giant idea that isn't well thought out. And when you ask them questions, they haven't thought about them. And I know, like, from your side of it, it's very frustrating. Like, it's going to be difficult working with them because they don't have a clear picture of what they want. But I do think a lot of times breeders have this idea, like, I think this is what I need, but I do want somebody who is specialized in building to kind of check this. So, where's the sweet spot on contacting a contractor, or is there a better thing to do in the middle to get ready?
From my experience is your dogs, you kind of know the type of facility they're going to need, obviously how many you have, and you can drive down at that point and have an idea of the space you'll need. What is it that's really going to help manage what I have? And if you have future plans for growth, then you need to have that as a thought also. How can I build this bigger? And at the end of the day, it comes down to I've actually been involved with other breeding facilities for people that just have one or two dogs. And, in Arizona, we don't have to worry about, blizzards and crazy amounts of snow and rain. We have sun and a lot of sun and wind and dirt and dust. So shade's a big factor here for the animals. It's harder to keep your grass green, constantly watering to maintain that. So how much work is going to go involved in trying to keep your dogs conditioned, giving the elements also. So,
Yeah.
here we don't have to worry about -20. It does get cold in the desert. People don't quite understand that. So you still have to be conscious of that. You go someplace like Wisconsin, it's cold, the wind is -20, and so how your dog's going to stay warm in that. And I actually have a friend who they had kennels under their barn, old farmhouse, and it was all a heated facility and they could let the dogs out. So the dogs were never cold, they could come in and go out. And it was underneath it, which was really neat because they had the chain link kennels put up and they had a
Mhm. How
floor
is it?
drained in the center.
How is it underneath?
It was a big barn,
It was like a
and
basement in the barn.
yeah, it
Wow.
was, and it had the big, like, not railroad ties, but timber floor in it. And it was a big barn. It was a hay barn. It was actually a big old farmhouse. Yeah.
Not the
And
floor
so it
underneath
was a
wasn't
concrete
timber.
foundation.
Okay. Hmm.
So it was like what would be equivalent to like a walkout basement. So up
Um,
top, you drove into the actual barn. You could park your tractor in there. That's how big the timbers were for the floor. And then they had poured a foundation, obviously, underneath that prior to building it. And
mhm.
then they had the floor drain. I don't think they had dogs in there when it was a farmhouse. They probably had their, livestock in there,
Yeah.
horses, whatever else, because it was big enough to put a few animals in there. As far as dogs, you could have about, I don't know, 10 dogs in there with no problem. And it was actually a really neat setup, but they could go in there and pressure wash it, and it was not a problem. Squeegee the floor to the
Because they had
drain.
the drain. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's the
So,
one thing that I had mentioned it, and this is a great example of not having things on paper. When I was working to have the kennels put up, I had this idea of a drain down the center on the inside, and I never got that correctly communicated. I thought he was understanding, he forgot it. And so, yeah, it's
yeah.
created a problem.
Yeah, once concrete's poured, it's really hard to put in drainage, unfortunately, or the block is in. And there's so much pre-planning in the thought process. And obviously, if it's your first time, you're gonna miss stuff. And after you do it once, then you have a way better idea and understanding of like, oh, I would totally do this differently.
Yeah.
You can fabricate stuff after the part, which isn't a bad thing, but you
I
got to
would
think
say like
about
drainage is probably one thing that should be
massive.
major. Like you really need to get that straight before you build anything for dogs.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it comes down to the cleaning. Can you spray it out and then clean it all up in one big swoop where it comes in and you spray it down and you drain it into some place and you can clean it all the
Yeah.
solids up. That's the biggest problem I've noticed with it is the cleaning, because you're going to use a lot of water. You're going to make a mess, and
Yeah.
then how do you get this out? And if you're doing it on a regular basis, where's it all going? Your
Yeah,
yard's
absolutely.
going to
Well,
get inundated with it.
I remember when we were looking at putting in, and I had contacted a septic contractor about the kennels, and he was like, "Well, like how much is like a dog's poop? And our dogs poop a lot, and I would say they're near the equivalent of a human in mass." And he said, "So you have 12 of them?" He's like, "That's like having a house with 12 people living in it." He says, "Imagine how many bathrooms that is." He says, "That is a huge septic system," and I just hadn't even thought about it, but it's like a $30,000 septic.
Yeah, so I mean, you think about it, you got dogs that have large solid stools, and you probably have to go in and scoop all that out first.
Yeah, much better
I
to remove
mean,
that.
unless you have the ability to design a system where you can push it out and push it down into some kind of catch can and then
Mhm.
haul it off, because
Yeah,
nobody's going to put in a $30,000 septic or put in some type of system that grinds up the solids and then spits it out. Believe me, enough money, you can build anything you want. It's all out there. I've seen it. You can clean the water and you can reuse the water. I mean, you're talking some massively expensive ideas here, but you got to look at the typical people have 2 to 3 dogs, 4 to 6 dogs. You're going to have to go in and you're going to scoop it out every day. And then, how are you pressure washing? Are you cleaning? Are you scrubbing? And are
sure.
you deep cleaning? What are you doing? And where's all that water going? So are
Hmm.
you putting a center drain in? Are you putting a drain in per kennel? Are you putting some type
Yeah.
of like curb system outside to where you can push it all to that? And then you have a special squeegee that pushes that all down to a big storing area where the water can dry out, or you can mix it with something and then discard it. So like again, it's something that scales to what you need, and you
Hmm.
will design it around the needs that you have. And most people, it's not a big deal to go in, and especially if you have somebody who's comes and manages, all those people that do the poop scooping. You can call companies to come out and
Right.
do that on a daily basis. It's not a bad way to go. Yeah, don't have the time. So you figure out where your time management is, and is it saving you money or costing you money to do stuff. Once you get to being so busy, it starts costing you money, and then you need to
Hmm.
stop and reevaluate your system and your structure
Yeah.
and outsource what you need to,
Hmm.
or build your facilities accordingly to accommodate your needs.
Yeah, I think so. It's embarrassing, but you can share if you want to explain. When we first met, people know I've shared on the podcast that you kind of looked at it like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with this?
I thought that's just what normal breeding was. Dogs just ran around, did what they wanted. I was like, wow, this is pretty neat. You got a dog farm here. No, it was very clear that kennels were imperative, to segregate the dogs because
Yeah.
it
It was,
eliminates so many problems.
yeah,
Management systems is your key to success. Without it, I don't know how you can be successful.
sure.
And
What did you see when you were, I mean, because, I remember one day you came over and you were like, look, you need facilities. Like you were just like so straight about it. But like it was so obvious to you in a way that wasn't obvious to me at the time. And of course, that was because I was stuck in this whole, I can just make it work. It's kind of special back then.
and that's
Um,
that's
what
that's
did
where
you
we all
see?
start. It's great to have somebody to mentor and see what success is, and that's how I got into construction. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't care for school. I just wanted to be out enjoying
Sure.
life. And I did. I walked on a construction site and I saw the guys I worked for. They had the boats and motorcycles and nice trucks and nice houses. And I'm like, they do this for a living and have that. And so I was just like, cool, I'll copy what they do. And I did. And I was like, wow, this is really easy. And it was easy to do the work, but running the business was a whole different game. And you'll find out with anybody is like, cool, I see your success. I'm just going to do that. But it's all the details in between that you don't realize. Like you got to bid jobs, you got to go get jobs, you got to know how to manage and buy the material and have employees and pay for insurance and get
Mhm.
licensing. And it's like all this other stuff you don't learn any other way by basically tripping and falling, what I call the learning curve. In entry to some businesses, the learning curve is huge and massive on an expensive level. And some it's very simple. You can get in and build the business. Construction back in the 90s was kind of like that. It was really easy. If you had half a brain and you can understand how to use this and read blueprints, you can make really good money. And that's what I did. I was like, this is really easy. But like as far as the breeding goes, when I came over and I was like, why do we have dogs in the living room? I was like, whoa, and I didn't think anything of it because I'd never been around it before. I didn't even know. I was like, dogs is breed. I didn't know anything. I was clueless,
Yeah.
and I saw what you had outside and dogs running around, and I was like, huh. And as we got to know each other, then another litter came and another litter came. I'm like, this, what, how do you even deal with this? Like, you need facilities. I was like, number one, that organizes to start with and gets you out of the house. And then, as far as having a family and then having dogs in there, it's like you got to separate your life from that stuff. And so it just starts from building in or out,
Yeah.
inwards, and then you just start building and you start to see what works and what doesn't work. And
Hmm.
it's really important to understand what your goals are.
Sure.
Now I'm just going to breed and make money. You really need to write down what it is your goals are. What are your projected year, next year, year after? Is this supplemental income or is this going to be a lifelong commitment, a 5-year commitment? And then, if you're young and you don't have a family, you just have a spouse, it's a little easier. But as you get family and it grows, it becomes something. If you don't have the systems in place, it will eat
Yeah.
your lunch. It will
Would
suck
you
all your time.
would you say that if you're sitting in a place and you think, "Oh my gosh, if I had one more litter right now, everything would crash." Like
Right.
that to me is a great moment like, "Oh yeah, that's a facilities problem."
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think I love the idea of being able to get to your puppies in your socks because I think you'll check them more, right? Like that's a beautiful thing. I love the other guideline of your adult dogs should be able to be left unattended for 12 hours and not be able to go to the bathroom without having to be in it. They should be able to eat, drink water. They should be able to be safe, right? So I don't want to come home and be like, "Oh, what surprise am I coming home to?" But like that to
Here's
me feels
I
reasonable.
agree. So for me, I'm super situationally aware, to the point that I'll wake up in the middle of the night and think and do stuff. And younger, I was way worse, but that's how I see animals because they're living, breathing things. They're not something you can put away and come back whenever you feel like the next day and deal with it. So they have needs and you're their caretaker. They're like your employees, and therefore you should treat them accordingly. And so, what does that mean to you? What's your quality of treatment to an employee? How do you see that? Some people, they can't go without seeing their dogs every 2 hours, making sure they're okay. Well, that becomes a problem because now you're obsessive compulsive with it. And if you have to be checking on your dogs to that degree, your quality of life can't be that great anymore because you're neglecting a lot of other things. Your attention is now focused on this, and that's where your energy is going to go. So wherever your attention is where your energy goes. So if you can't walk away from your dogs for 8 to 10 to 12 hours or overnight, and you're losing sleep over it, you're changing your lifestyle to the point where you're neglecting those around you, yourself, because of your animals, then you need to stop and be like, cool, we need to design something that accommodates this for this time frame. And
Sure.
so with animals, it's like you can go as far as putting cameras in, especially if you're building facility, you can wire for that. There's wireless cameras, and that stuff is so accessible on your phone. And you know that you can also do automatic watering if you want. And the breeds of dogs obviously play into
They
this
change things.
usually, because
Sure.
our dogs, they'll just destroy everything, jumping all over the place like freaks. And in their water buckets, the males just want to pee in their own water, so you have to put the buckets up. It's just like all these little details you don't think of, and you realize, wow, they destroyed all this. I have to make everything block or steel so they can't eat it, tear it up, jump on it. And you learn this is the learning curve. This is the process of like elimination. Don't do that again. Bad idea. You got little dogs, it's not such a big deal. They're pretty calm usually. So again, depending on the breed you have and the size of the dog, kind of dictates that. But what's the quality of life you want your employees to have? Do you want to be locked up in a crate because your facilities are not accommodating for them? Or is their quality of life? Do you want to put just a kennel up so that they're now in a 3x8 or 4x8 or 4x6, and at least they can move back and forth? And do you want them to have a run that's exterior so you can close them off at night? And then again, do you want them to have an open yard they can go to? It's really understanding all those details for you to build a facility that's successful and produces the results you want. And then, of course, when it comes to the whelping mothers, you need the segregation. You need to be able to trust those puppies aren't going to be able to get into another kennel or get their heads through something. It's important to design your kennel accordingly. And then it needs to be able to be cleaned. And then, of course, those dogs are going to get bigger depending on the size of the litters, how much room they're going to need for the next 8 weeks. And if you have multiple females at that point, you have to think about that too. So, I mean, when you build something, it pays dividends to put the thought into it ahead of time, because there's nothing worse than building something that doesn't work and doesn't facilitate it, and you're still having to deal with another avenue to manage your dogs, and then you put the money and energy and time into this system that's not accommodating 100% of what you need. So now your time again is divided, and that time divided could be used for other beneficial things for furthering your business, or just free time or family time or personal time.
Just quality of life. Yeah.
And so for spouses, it's a big deal, because your vision isn't always their vision, and your understanding or the way you do things isn't always the same as they would have things done or like things done. I love to come home and it's quiet and peaceful, not a bunch of dogs screaming in the background. And so, that's, for me as a spouse, it's like, okay, we need to adjust this, or we need to figure a better idea out for this. One big thing I find is, male dogs, and it's not the female dogs, it's the male dogs, because they want to pee on everything. I more frequently than I have to go out and water certain things because it just gets inundated, so it's like you got to manage the dogs in a manner that still doesn't, it can't dictate your life, but obviously it does, because it's your business. So as soon as you put in a system that works and works for you, you're going to tweak it. You're always going to have a little tweaking of things. It just changes the dynamic of the entire business, and it's pleasurable on a different level for everybody at that point.
Well, I thought like a great example that you had brought up, and it was so funny because when I was talking to some turf people, they had already mentioned a very similar thing. But you said, look, if we're going to get turf for these areas, it makes sense. The dogs will stay cleaner, less risk of parasites, but we should have some sort of sprinkler that runs to wet it down to get that urine to dissipate and go into the ground. And that was very smart, right? And it was so funny because here I am talking to this turf guy, and he tells me the same thing. He goes, He goes, yeah, he says a lot of people, we take out their grass, but we leave their sprinkler system. And I was like, yes, exactly, because they
Yeah,
want to water their turf to keep it clean. And so that those are those little things, like you said. And so if you have a sprinkler system that you just like turn on, now that's one less thing you have to manage. It's
exactly.
just
Perfect
that's
example. In Arizona, that's critical because
oh
we
God,
don't
we
get
don't get
rain on a
rain.
rain.
I know the one girl who's like, my turf never smells. I'm like, well, she lives in Miami and it rains.
Yeah, so see, so again, it's the region you live in, and it makes a big difference in that. For us, we have to put up some shade structure in
Yeah,
the new
all the
area
time.
because even though it doesn't get sun all day, it makes a big difference in so many different ways. And so it's just important to understand where you're at, what you need, where you're
Sure.
putting it, in
Hmm.
relation to everything going on. And it could be super simple and cost effective. And then there's people that are going to need to build a full facility.
Hmm.
And, at the end of the day, it's something you will really appreciate. And it makes
Hmm.
your business and the
Yeah.
professionalism when people come over, if they see it, it's a good thing to have for the animals.
Hmm.
The quality of the program. And then I know with females, some of them are very they get stressed out, so you don't,
You can't even.
you got to think about all that stuff. I'm obviously not a dog breeder, and I know the breeds we have, and
Mhm.
so I understand how they react and what they need. But
Yeah.
somebody who's doing very sensitive dogs might realize they need to be separate and
Mhm.
soundproof room and very climate controlled with AC and heat and very delicate, I guess you could say.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you're going to see that too with some of the, oh, I'll always say this word wrong, but the brachycephalus breeds with the shorter noses, they just don't manage climate as well. So you have to have more stuff. But I mean, and you see the difference too in just between the rat terriers and the GSPs. I mean, they're wholly different. The puppies, the dogs, everything.
Very the GSPs will eat everything. I can't leave anything in the backyard. It's just destroyed. And then the rat terriers, they don't care so much about the hoses and things, and they don't gnaw on everything. But it's just funny because that's totally it.
Yeah.
We've had to put up fences because of the jumpers, but you got to think coyotes will actually jump fences, and a lot of people don't know that they'll actually jump the fences now, and they become so docile in communities that they'll come right in and befriend your dog, take your dog right there. So it's like predatory stuff you got to be aware of too when you're building,
Yeah.
snakes, other things of that sort. So like I said, here where we live, we have things different than where people in Wisconsin would live, or
Mm.
Montana, or North Carolina.
What would your advice be to breeders who are maybe at that stage in their business? Maybe not exactly like when we first met, but a little bit further where they are in such a bad situation. But where they have a little bit of money to spend, but certainly not enough to build a facility. Because I think some of these larger facilities that host more dogs, once you're building something that's going to host 8 to 12 dogs, you're looking at least, 50, $60,000, at least today in
Mm-hmm.
2026,
Oh
which
yeah,
wouldn't be
easily.
surprising to push that to 120 or more, depending on what you're building. And so if they're not in a place, but maybe they have somewhere 5, 10, $20,000 to spend, or maybe they don't permanently live, like they're renting and they plan on moving, but they're going to be there. What do you think?
There's modular ways to do things. And that's creativity. And again, according to the breed, the size, how big it is, that's something that's really critical to the equation here. I mean, just block alone is a good way to do things.
Just cinder blocks, yeah.
Cinder blocks. The thing with like using wood is it obviously is it's just not a great way to go because it absorbs urine
Yeah,
and
but
other
just it's
stuff.
hard to use those wood sheds. A lot of people want to buy a wood shed and convert it, and I do find
Yeah,
it can be done, but it's so hard with
a
water.
lot of work. So I mean, there's ways to, you could use wood if you put a certain vinyl flooring down, and then you can use wood, and you can where the seam is, you can wrap the vinyl up the wall and underneath the wood, and then screw the wood down. It's not a perfect system, but it's as close to perfect as you can get. If you're just doing this to get by for now, there's easy ways to go about. There's lots of synthetic building materials that you can buy at Home Depot, and you can make shift stuff easily.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit of work. and you can pretty much YouTube a lot of this stuff on how to fasten things, what tools you'll need. It doesn't take much. You don't have to have a extensive background in anything, honestly. You can see what somebody did, and then you can just kind of reverse engineer it. And there's so many creative things out there, people. I mean, it's just, I love it because I'm always still learning. I don't know everything. I know a lot of stuff that doesn't work, but I know what works because I've had to deal with it. Metal is a great way to go if you can fasten it correctly. You don't want the dogs to get hurt on it. So for exteriors, metal is it's pretty much maintenance free once you install it. Home Depot offers panels that are actually designed to be modular, and they're like the thickness, half-inch thickness that you can buy, and you can fasten that to the wood too. And there's plastic you can get.
Those modular metal panels, what are they for? Are they for siding?
Those are plastic ones. Modular plastic ones. They're actually considered wallboard.
Oh, okay. And then is that something you could pressure wash, or is it?
Yeah, you can just screw them to the wall and pressure wash them.
Are they designed for outdoor use or just inside?
Mostly, yeah. You don't want them in direct sun.
Okay, because the plastic will get eaten, at least definitely here. I know when everybody's like, it takes 1,000 years for a plastic bag to disintegrate in a landfill, and it's like, or like 30 days in the sun in Arizona.
Yeah. No, the sun destroys things on a new level here.
Yeah.
So protecting things is important. So whatever materials you're using. But as far as there's a lot of different ways you can go about to facilitate what you need. You just got to get creative, imagination, look at what everybody else has done, and because you're probably trying to fit it into some place at the moment that works for you. You can cut holes in the wall from your garage to the outside if you needed to. It's not that hard to do, and you just can buy the doggy door, put it in. So I mean, makeshift stuff pretty fast, for garages, or if you had plastic sheds. There's a lot of plastic sheds you can buy now with the floors, and just cut them up the way you want and put some. You can get this stuff all at Home Depot, smaller fencing. Even you can buy actual panels too, fence panels, so you could separate. If you just had 2 dogs, it's easy to do. Just cut a hole in there.
I love like anything modular that you can take with you when you move, like all the kennel panels that just bolt together with those brackets. To me, that I love that because we can always rearrange.
It has a lot of that stuff, and it's really good, really some really good built stuff. And it comes with the roofs, so dogs can't get out of them. Nothing can get into the dogs. So, and they're big enough you can actually separate. You could buy those and separate those if you wanted. So it's really just getting creative, going out there, looking around, and you'll figure it out pretty fast, I think.
Going back to the contractor thought on things, sometimes when you're working with a client, like I know from your side of it, they'll be like, I want to do this and use this material. And you're like, that's a terrible choice of material. But I know other times, there are things that are just not convenient. They might be something, the product that the client really wants, and the contractor is not comfortable using that material or isn't familiar with it and doesn't really want to deal with it. So how do you differentiate between, like, how much do you drive with the material you want and how much do you let the contractor guide you with what works?
The number one thing I've found, especially in recent years, is educating customers. They have an idea because they saw something and they just want that. And what I found was I educate them and I explain to them why it's not a good idea or why it is a good idea and what materials they should use, and from my experience. And then I got to look at it from my point of view is like, do I want to deal with this when it doesn't work out? Is this going to last them? Do I want to steer them clear because I care about what I produce and give to them, and they're not going to be happy in a year because this isn't going to work for them? At the end of the day, it's their choice. I tell people that, like, don't compromise what you want, get what you want. Don't let the contractor tell you no because he doesn't like it. Explain why he doesn't like it, not just because he doesn't want to deal with it, because it might take him more time or it might be more of a difficult product to work with. That's just the name of the game in contracting, is there are some easier ways to go, but because it equates to time and money. And then sometimes guys just aren't qualified to work with the materials. They don't understand how to make it work and look right and fit right. And so it's really an education aspect with customers to explain to them, this is what we need to do. For example, a job I was bidding with some people, they wanted a big shade structure, 40 by 40, and you got to drill 6 feet into the ground. And the ground here is literally like cement. And to find a machine that can drill 6 feet straight, because you're putting up 4 posts that have to be perfectly aligned and square. They cannot be out more than about half an inch. It just, you can't bend everything to make it work at that point to put the shade structure together. I was racking my brain on this, like, how can I get down to that 6 feet and without physically doing it myself? And these are 3-foot wide holes. Finally, it just occurred to me. I talked to another guy. He goes, just have the engineer re-engineer it with a spread footing where the concrete spreads out 5 foot by 5 foot. It'll basically engineered to do the same thing, keep the structure from flying away. And it's only like 3 feet into the ground, but you're talking 5 foot by 5 foot by 3 feet of concrete. That's
But
a
it's easy.
lot.
We have tools for that here, like
Right.
machinery that can do that. We don't have machinery
Right.
that can dig 6 foot down here.
So again,
Yeah.
there I go, like the customer says, I want the holes. Well, I'm like, well, it's going to cost you an extra $3,000 for me to put these holes in. And then I'm like, here's your alternative. Oh, that makes more sense. Will it work for what you need? Oh yeah, no problem. So it's coming up with a good solution, not just saying, no, I won't do that, or no, you can't do that. It's the education aspect of it. And usually I find pretty much most of the time, anytime I say, this has been an experience, here's pictures, or here's what I think, this is what's happened, they're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. But they still get what they want in the end. I'm
Yeah.
not compromising their dream or their desire, their needs
Yeah.
to facilitate. It's easier for me, or I can get in there out of there faster. And so that's what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, if they're not happy when you walk away, then it's unfortunate, because it's like a nick on your
Your reputation. Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. It also makes sense. I like that. So the vetting process, if the contractor comes to you with an alternative, like I think one example I had run into with a breeder I was working with is we talked about epoxy. And of course we have another interview coming up with another Bill, and he's going to talk about epoxy flooring, which is so great. But it requires a contractor with a certain set of skills, and they aren't always available in rural areas, but sometimes it's easier to find a tile guy. And so when we ran the numbers, she would have to bring someone in from 3 hours away to do the epoxy. And so their travel time in and of itself made the price so much more. It was just much more readily available, plus the scheduling to get it done with tile. And it was not a huge crisis. She was covering a concrete floor. But for her, it ultimately was about half the price to do it with tile, and it made sense. But I do find that, yeah, so I like that. So the contractor should be able to explain the option that they think is and why they think it's better, or where there may be a problem with your current option. And then they check to see if it will meet your needs. I think that's such a big one. And I think they could present to you issues. Like, for example, you might have said, like, well, this will be larger and it will be wider. It'll come out of the ground maybe, or something. And so do you want to deal with, is that okay if we have this here?
What I've realized over the years of doing construction is people like building houses and sizes of houses and the room dimensions. They really have no concept of that. They see it on paper, and everybody sees that as, oh, wow, that looks big. What I do, I go out and actually spray paint the entire house on the ground for them. And
I
then they
love
get
that.
to sit there in that room. And although the walls aren't up, they're like, this seems small. And I'm like, yeah, but on paper, it looked like it worked, right? And they're like, no. So, I mean, one of the houses I just completed, I pushed their whole kitchen wall out 2 feet, which was huge, because they would have had no room to actually walk from one room to the other. And I had laid the whole thing out and showed them, let's adjust this, because everybody's visual. Unless you've been doing, like construction, and you see 3-dimensionally and you can understand sizes because you've just been involved in building things,
Yeah.
it's hard for people to understand that. And that's where I find so many people, not so many people, but more contractors don't explain this stuff. And they just like, cool, this is what you want, you gave it to me and I built it. Well, why didn't you say this was going to be like this? And that's the difference in somebody who's been doing it a long time and cares versus a lot of the younger, I would say, inexperienced contractors. And they just don't understand what people really want, or
Yeah.
they just don't think about it. They're just like, cool,
Hmm.
you hired me, I'm going to do it, I'm in and out. It's like the auto mechanic that goes to fix something on your car, and he doesn't tell you, like, hey, this is failing over here. And
Yeah.
then 2 weeks down the road, this breaks when and causes all those other problems. When if he would have just said, hey, you might want to fix this while we're here, it'll save you a lot of time and money down the road. And I don't know why people don't think like that, but it's pretty frustrating in the contracting world, because I come across that a lot. And especially with remodels, people, they just don't see they can't see the bigger picture, because they just don't do the stuff. They don't know that we can move this and adjust this and make this
Right. They don't
bigger.
think like if we just move the toilet over 3 inches, it's so easy. It's like, no, it's
Yeah.
not.
And so it's like, well, let's do this instead, and because that's going to cost you $5,000 more. And if we do all this, it's just going to cost a little bit, and remodeling is a huge one. And it's the same thing with building facilities is, if you twist it like this and shape it like this, it'll work way better. It'll give you a better use of the area
Yeah.
and more efficient. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I see that much. That makes way more
Yeah.
sense. And if a contractor isn't going to give you that time of day to sit there and brainstorm and answer your questions, and and there is a kind of a limit where,
There is a little bit of a limit, right? Because
yeah,
I feel
like
like when somebody comes to us with a soup sandwich and they're like,
yeah.
but I just kind of want to do this. And you're like, well, have you
Hmm.
thought about this? And they're like, no, no, no. You're kind of like, okay, like this is not going to go anywhere because you don't even know what you want. Remember
Yeah.
that we have that older electrician we love that we work with, and he goes, I won't do a new house for first time home builders. He's like, and I was like, why? And he goes, they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
it's
and it
true.
was like so true.
It is so
So,
true. Lighting
mm,
is a major one. Lighting is huge. You cannot have enough lights, and he's very true in that aspect. I mean, I tell people, you're gonna want this, you're gonna want this, and then I'm not joking. It happened on the last one. Wow, we should have put in some more lights here. That's why we have the walkthrough. And I explained to you, I want to do this. You can't have enough, and it's way easier to do everything as put those things in as you're going than it is to come back and cut open walls and rearrange stuff and adjust
oh
stuff.
gosh, yeah. It's always
And
cheaper to do it first, like at the first time, first pass. Did you would you give a ballpark on estimates? I mean, I know in construction we always do the best we can, right, to give a good estimate. But sometimes there's just things you won't know. Would you say there's an average extra spend that goes over? Most projects end up being like 15% over or something like that.
nowadays it's 15 to 20%.
Okay.
And people get they get weird. It's like you're spending, let's say, 20,000 to do this, and that spending that extra 2,000 to make this the way you want, but you won't spend it. And you're going to, every time you walk in or you have to deal with something that is about that, it's going to irritate you. And that's the thing is, expect to spend more money. And if you don't, that's great. But if you
Mhm.
do, then you're not frustrated and you've kind of planned for it. So
Yeah.
especially with custom stuff. I mean, you build a garage, it's four walls and a roof and a door and some electrical. I'm it's going to be like this, but like, God, I wish I would have went that extra foot. Now my
Mhm.
truck can fit in the garage. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Well,
fit because I didn't go that extra foot.
oh yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's going to be an extra $3,500, but guess what? You can't use it for what you wanted, and
Yeah.
it happens time and time again with people, and it's hard because you're on a budget and it already might be tight, and so you might have to forego some stuff, and maybe it takes you longer to build it, but it's worth it in the end, because the cost to rearrange that, fix that, or add to it later is going to be way more. It's usually 15 to 20%.
Yeah. And why do you think that's not in the original estimate? Like, how would you like, because I
It
know it, but I'm
usually
like,
comes
why?
down to amenities, extras, people upgrading things, adding, you add stuff, because like I said, everything on looks great on paper, and then you're standing in it now that it's built, and you're like, oh, we need this. We need to put some plumbing over here. I didn't even think about that. And so to bring in the plumbing would be another $1,500 to cut open the wall, put some new piping in, adjust this. And every situation is different, but that's a big deal. Or you need to move a door because it was too close to something. And so really attention to detail as you're going through the project, it's very important to be engaged in it. Don't just be like, contractor showed up and left. Go out there, look at it, every aspect of it, make sure, you might want to put a drain in the floor that you weren't thinking about the day before he pours concrete, and be like, no, we need to get a drain in here right now, because once that's poured, it ain't going in. It just
Yeah.
ain't going to happen. And that could completely compromise your plan. Some
Mhm.
simple little detail. And I've seen, we missed some plumbing here. Well, that's really sucks. How are you going to put it in? That's not my problem. That was yours. Or we're going to do this. Is there anything else you can see?
Yeah.
So really being engaged in it really helps you understand it, and you're going to have a whole different understanding once you go through one project too. So you'll
Yeah, that
see
makes sense.
things, and because there's always stuff that comes to you while you're doing it. People always change stuff. Very, very rarely have I ever just done something, a project for somebody, and they didn't adjust one thing,
Sure.
or I've had to adjust it because it just ain't gonna work. And that's where, getting the right contractor or contractors pays off, and word of mouth, just cold calling people. It's really difficult because I know where we live here. I know everybody in this town when it comes to contractors, and I know who to go with and who not to go with. I know what kind of
Mhm.
jobs you're going to get, quality with the guys in this town. And I have a hard time recommending people because I just know what I expect and what it should be and what the cost will be. And
Mhm.
I have a hard time recommending people. And I feel
Makes
bad
sense.
when I turn down projects, but I just know, again, experience. I turned down a job and I really wanted to do it for the people, but they live out of state. It's a remodel from a 1966 home, and I just know how this is going to go. It's not going to be, it's going to cost me so much time to do it that at the end, and then if they're really going to be happy with the product and the job when they have to move into it. Some people try to force things, and when you're forcing stuff, you need
Yeah.
to step back and reevaluate, why is this so difficult? I feel like I'm pushing, and then maybe it's contractor's not right for you. Maybe you're missing something. You're missing a detail. Something's missing. You sometimes just put the brakes on,
Yeah.
reevaluate it. Maybe I shouldn't put this here. Maybe we should move it over to here. Well, I don't
Mhm.
want it there. Well, think about it a little more. Maybe it makes more sense for the future, or for, you don't, whatever the circumstances are.
Mhm.
Really being in alignment with what you're doing is key component.
No, it makes so much sense. It saves so much time too. And so I do think you need to come into the project with a good, like your brain, you really have to have a good idea of what you want. Be willing and open minded to take suggestions that they can explain that still will meet your needs. I think it's really important. And it's hard because you're not going to likely build too many facilities, right? Like you might
Right.
build two ever. And so it's very difficult to see. So I really hesitate to tell new breeders to build a facility right from the start because one, you may not like it. Two, it's a lot of investment. I don't want you going into a lot of debt for it, but you need to try a couple things before you know what your dogs need and what that setup should be.
I think,
And
yeah, if you
yeah.
can go and look at, just kennels and places and
Oh, yeah, the
see.
animal shelter. The animal shelter is always, they're usually a funded giant multi-million dollar project.
Mhm.
But check them out. Check out boarding facilities that were commercial but privately owned because I find the mindset in those two is different, right? So one's about giving the
Mhm.
dog a little bit more quality, one's about efficiency, and seeing the two of those together, you can kind of push and pull. I had a girl when we were designing the facilities we have now. I went over to the animal shelter in town and I said, "Can you just give me a tour? I'm looking at building one for myself." And I said, "Would you like, would you not like?" And she had put they had a not a high quality epoxy outside in the outdoor runs. So they had block walls on the sides and then they had an epoxy paint to kind of give it the look. And it wasn't a high quality one and the sun just destroyed it. So it was chipped everywhere. She says it was actually harder to clean than just bare concrete. She had wished they just left the bare concrete. And
Right.
then the inside, they had drains in every single pen, which made sense because they had block walls, floor to ceiling.
Mhm.
But she says sometimes the dogs get stuck, sometimes the poop doesn't fit in it. And so she said we are constantly getting them clogged and having to unclog them.
So,
And so she says it's just miserable. But, and that's a multi-million dollar facility. So it's very interesting working with a contractor who has built a facility before for boarding facilities or something like that might not be a bad place to start to get some ideas. But I love
mhm.
the idea of going around and just investigating, what's great.
No, absolutely. I've seen some really neat designs. And again, depends on what you have, what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are.
Mhm.
Sometimes simple is the best. And then sometimes, you want a grooming table in there, you want a dog wash. You can put soundproofing on the ceiling so it's not deafening in there. There's lots of neat ideas you can do depending on the space, and you can make it like a little daycare center, for the dogs. And then you can have just basic bare bones, throw up chain link and the doors and put holes in the wall outside for the runs. I mean, there's sky's the limit. It just depends on what you need to what
Yeah.
works for you. And
Yeah. Would you say start with the needs, right? Like the dogs need to be able to get out of the sun. The dogs need to be warm at this sort of outdoor temperature that, and list out, they need to be able to run. They need X amount of square footage. Like for me, the 12-hour rule is great. I also, I also want like a simpler setup where we can't
oh
always trust the people that are watching our dogs, right? Because they won't latch the thing right or this. And so
yeah.
I need it as foolproof as possible. So one thing you could even look at doing is how can I feed the dogs without opening the pen? Is there a
Right.
way that I could use a funnel to feed through the fence or have an opening or something like that, just so that I don't have to open the door?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Just
all
for
those
people
little
short
things
term.
are important. I mean,
Yeah.
I've wanted to be able to automate things, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways to automate. The
Water
doors would
can
open
always
up.
be automated.
You
Yeah.
could set it up so that these dogs get to go out at this time and they come back in, and you can have the camera set up. There's just a lot of the watering's a big thing. Being able to have the dogs make sure if they knock over the buckets or whatever, you're gonna be gone for a while. That mostly that is like when you're gone for extended periods of times.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. But
Yeah.
obviously it's contact every day with the animals multiple times a day. That's always going to be there. So to me, there's a lot of neat things you can do to make your kennels fun and cool. And then if you just need them simple and a place for the dogs that's safe,
Yeah.
also.
But for all those breeders that are in that moment where we've all been, where we're rotating dogs by kennel because we don't have a better system that's still safe, to me, that's the moment in time when you're like, oh, I really need something. I need a
Right.
facility to fix this problem. Well, you know how it goes. And oh, plan for expansion. You brought this up, but I just want to reiterate it. You might get an adult dog back who's still intact, right? So you just can't put them into Gen Pop, right? They need to be in their own place. Sometimes you need to quarantine a dog. Sometimes you have a sick dog that needs to be away from other dogs where you're not going to contaminate anything with puppies. So think about those worst case scenarios that you might run into. You'll invariably get a dog back at some point, right? And that can happen. And you'll invariably have a situation where, some dog could be sick or needing care. Even if they broke their leg, they just can't be around other dogs. So there
Right.
needs to be these safety places. So I want to know that, like, worst case scenario, I'm gone, right? But my neighbor could like let the guy into the kennels and he could just throw his dog here, right? Like that's worst case scenario. But I now
Right.
have a set, kennel, maybe 10 by 10 that somebody could just go in, drop a dog. I'm not there, but it'll be there and safe when I get back. Like that's extreme, right? But
Yeah,
having
for
that in
us, I
your
know
head,
we get that
yeah.
with some customers that we board their dogs for.
Well, they're
I
very
mean,
familiar, yeah.
yeah, so you just everybody's got a plan for something different, and that's the thing is what does it look like your normal day-to-day operations look like for you.
Mhm. And
Are
worst
you
case. Yeah.
who manages your animals when you need somebody to help you out? And so you take in all these things into consideration.
Yeah.
Has your spouse got to go out there? Does your spouse know anything about it? Are they completely hands off from it, or are they able to
Um,
jump in and take over when you're gone? And I mean, and then like you said, if you have a litter on the ground, if you have some dog you're boarding or one that you got back that you're in the process of rehoming,
yeah.
there's a lot of different situations that can pop up. Not everybody has a luxury of having empty lanes for that. So it is a conscious use of the space and what the potential of that could be
Mhm.
too. It's all in the planning. The planning, just don't get lost in the details, but the details are important. And then you execute. And then after that, you'll find, this came out perfect, exactly as I visioned. And most of the time it does, but there'll be a little bit of adjustments.
Oh yeah,
And
there's always something to shift.
there's
Yeah.
always something. So, you forgot to put the water spigot on the outside. You just don't know. I mean, maybe having a door over here would have been better because you wanted to put the table over there and the drain goes out over there. You just don't know.
No, you really don't know. I do think, plan for a little bit, like think of your worst case scenarios and you don't need to build your entire facility around them, but maybe building
Right.
a flex space to sort of mitigate some of those,
Right.
the return dog or the sick dog, maybe you share the same quarantine pen. But, just something to give you flexibility.
No, I've known a few people who breed and what they've done and what works, and it seems even the basic facility is better than no facility. Just
Yeah, something.
the basic stuff, and the quality of life for the dog, and that's the other thing. I mean, in essence, they're like an employee. I mean, most people really do care about their animals, even though they're outside being, breeders. And yeah, I just find the quality of life for the dog is way better when the facilities are in. You mitigate all the risk of the
Oh, yeah.
fights, anything like that. You just don't know, you
hmm
know.
Well, Giardia got so much better once we had the facilities because I could
Right.
manage them, and we never had to worry about a dog not getting enough food because they were, they weren't eating out of the same bowl anymore. They were all getting their own individual food. Like there was a lot of little improvements that, while you don't necessarily want a dog in a kennel lane all day, it's nice to have them in there for sleep. It's nice to have them in there if you're gone for the day, and it's nice to have them in there for food time. Feels like the right answer because you can monitor them individually.
Exactly.
Exactly. And it's
Absolutely.
way easier for people to leave. Before you and I got together and we had the facilities, I couldn't leave. I
Right.
just
No,
couldn't. I
you
had
were a prisoner to your animals.
I was. Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
like we couldn't even go away for one night because I just couldn't trust anybody. There was no one I could trust. The dogs couldn't be left unattended for more than 12 hours, and it
It's
was
kind
too
of like,
complicated.
it's kind of like kids. You gotta get away from them sometimes. It's like it's time to go. Gotta go be by myself and
Right. You
get
need
my
a
wits back.
grandma, right? You
Yeah,
need a
so
grandma
it
for your
it
dog.
is. I can understand first time new breeders and their need to be consciously attentive to the dogs and be around them all the time. But you'll find you're gonna be like, yeah, I need to find something else. I can't be around the dog all day. And as it grows, you'll start to realize you have to pull away and do things and go places. And like I said, as you grow, whether you have a family or not, you guys are going to be doing family things, or the kids got stuff to do, or to know that they're safe, taken care of, and you could honestly not have to think about it while you're
Yeah.
gone, because you're always going to be second guessing. Did I do this? Did I do that? Oh my gosh, what if they get out? It's a disaster. And when it starts ruling your life in a negative manner, that's when you need to stop and reevaluate and be like, I got to
Mhm.
change this. And
Yeah.
it's in that trajectory of maintaining that trajectory it's
Mhm.
disastrous down the road.
So
It
true. Well, I
really
noticed
is.
just since converting our Arizona room for the puppies and the combination of that organization with our lovely neighbor who's so good with the dogs, that's like the sweet spot, right? Like we've gone on multiple trips now where I have not worried the whole time about the dogs because I know
Mhm.
she'll tell me if there's something that's really wrong. I know that they're being checked. I don't have to check in and make sure they're checked. It's
Right.
just it's such a nice thing, and it really has made a whole difference in how I feel when we go on trips. I can relax.
It is nice. I can too.
Yeah,
So
it's been good. Any other thoughts you want to add? Things think people should think about when working with a contractor? I think you gave us a lot of wonderful things to toss around and think about.
it's just important to meet them face to face, get to know them, and you
hmm
can tell real fast if you're probably gonna be a good fit for each other or not. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and with it, that's how I interview my customers, because years of doing this, I can tell which ones will be a pleasure to work for, which ones will be difficult, which ones you just shouldn't. Gut feelings, they're there for a reason. So it's an investment. You got to understand that it's an investment with an ROI, return of investment, and it'll pay off in dividends.
Which is bring me. I did forget. I wanted to ask you. A lot of times people come in and they say they don't know what they want and they're overly conscious about money. And I feel like that combination makes a terrible client.
Is difficult because they
Yeah.
have no concept at that point. All they see is the money, and then they don't know what they want, so they have no idea how they come
Well,
together.
and I think it's really hard for you to charge, like, if you're going to do more work to help them figure out what they want, because it is time invested on your part to run through
Mhm.
ideas with them and help them do that stuff, you should be charging more as the contractor. And yet they're very conscious about money. Oh, I don't want to overspend. And so I think if you come into it and you're like, I don't really know what I want, I need you to help me figure this out, and I need it to be like super cheap,
Right.
you're just going to get a terrible job.
It is true. People that have no idea what they want, they just, I need something here. And then I don't want to spend a lot of money. As soon as they say that, it's like red. red flags, because I got to bid this and it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then you don't know what you want. So is this going to flow correctly, or is this going to be a stop and go process because everything costs too much, or I don't think I can do it? And then you spent your time as a contractor bidding this whole job out and having to basically build it from the ground up and present it to them on paper. And then they're like, I don't want to do it. It's too much. Or can we cut this or cut that?
Yeah.
And that's where it's
Way
really
too much.
hard to cut prices, because it is kind of a special build. It's not like a house where we could, well, we'll go with the cheaper countertops or the cheaper cabinets, or we'll, go with a asphalt roof versus a metal roof. So, there's places we can cut costs in certain projects, but when it comes to like a facility build, it's going to be kind of hard to cut costs. The way you do that is in the size. And so if you're compromising your size because of your money, then maybe you want to build it in sections. So it's important to have a good idea. You don't have to know exactly, but I got X amount of dollars to spend, and then I got to go ahead and I need something that's this size. And so you just tell the contractor, I have about this much to spend. Do you think we could do this? And then that gives you a starting point. And then you're like, okay, maybe my ideal build isn't going to work. I'll scale it back to what will work with that amount of money. And again, it's important to know cost. It's hard to figure that out, but contractors, they can take advantage of you. And that's the scary thing, is it really helps if you know somebody.
You're saying be familiar with the cost of what the materials are.
Yeah, it's easy to go to Home Depot, get an idea. I want this. You can go price materials, and it's simple math. You can search the internet and kind of get an idea for costs.
ChatGPT is actually not too bad for breaking down certain things by
actually,
square footage. It tends to be, what I've found, slightly higher than what we can get a contract price for. If I was like, wow, that's a little high for if I was going to bid that job. But it is nice because then you can kind of plan for that number, and it's got you a little cushion.
And I mean, if you're going to do some of this stuff yourself too, like I said, you could be as simple as like, I need a concrete floor from a contractor, and maybe you just stop there and save more money. And then I want to think about how I want to arrange it, type of thing. I mean, you don't have to do the whole thing at once. You could just hire a sub, just a concrete guy to come in and do that. You don't need a general. You're going to pay more for a general because he's project managing the whole thing. He's going to go ahead and coordinate everything for you. But if you just know what you want, you're like, I'll hire this guy and this guy, and you already have plans, and there's people of all different caliber that, like, I can think through the whole thing and this is what I want. And then there's some people I don't know. And then there's others are like, well, I want this and this for now. I'll do all the other work myself. Again, sweat equity, you can't beat that. And then you really have an appreciation for what you built. And you're like, oh, I can change this because it's just me,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
So there's many ways to skin the cat, if you want to say. So
and I don't think we clarified this earlier, but just so for people who aren't understanding, general contractors kind of cover the whole job, and because they're project managing, one thing that people misunderstand is that they often are going to hire specific subcontractors. They're going to have a preferred plumber or two that they use, or an electrician or two that they use, and that's part of the job. Is getting them, is hiring that. So when you are hiring the general and they don't do that particular trade in-house, there will be the added cost of hiring the sub. And that's very normal in general contracting world, and it makes it worth it for doing a large project like a giant facility. But like you're saying, if you just need a slab, just hire the concrete guy.
And you'll find generals like me, I like to do some of the work. So I'll come in as a general because I have the skill sets to do most of the stuff. I'll come in and do it. Just that way I don't have to take more jobs, and I enjoy doing the work, and it's just fun for me. And so I'll bring in my own guy or guys and I'll do it. Electrical is a licensed trade outside of a general contractor. So you have to hire an electrician by law or code, if you want to call it. But like the framing, the block work, the concrete, like I could do all of that myself. I can do the roofing, the drywall, but I could still hire it out too. So sometimes you'll get a better deal with the smaller guys just because they will facilitate most of it themselves. And other times you get the guy who's what we call as a paper pushing contractor, who doesn't do anything but call and make schedules. and manage the job. He's just the paper guy. He's the in
Mhm.
between. He facilitates your build, and he
Yeah.
talks with you, and then he executes.
I do think with the general one thing that's nice because you know sometimes you give them that half down like you had said and the subcontractor ghosts or the specific trade ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
When you hire a general, they're often the one who coordinated that subcontractor. So
Yep.
they are going to be that buffer and they're ultimately responsible for getting things fixed if that
There's
fails.
a problem, yeah. So
So
there,
that's
it's
nice.
risk management, mitigating. You know, if a trade doesn't perform accordingly and you hire them yourself, and they're like, "Well, sorry, I don't know what to tell you." You know, you go to the general and you're like, "This isn't right," or he'll probably catch it, but then that he's the guy that isn't going to get paid until the job is fixed because you're dealing with your contracts with him, not any of the subs. And
Right.
so in the construction world, that's how that works. You're paying the general contractor directly. So he is the guy in charge. And if something's wrong, you're like, well, look, you know, this isn't to what you said, or this is wrong, this is not correct, or this is terrible. That's the leverage you have when it comes to subs and guys you hire off the street, if you want to call them, or they're not licensed. And again, you know, it's a judge of character, and you have to really do your homework on who you hire. And that's where the word of mouth is huge. People have had success using this guy, or they have a license, and you could
Hmm.
check that out and make
Yeah.
sure they're legit and legal and they don't have any lawsuits. It happens all the time. I've seen it. It's happened all the time around here.
Yeah.
In
I
other
think,
places, they just take the money and go, "Oh, I'm
yeah.
going to do it on the side for you and give you a better price." It's like if you know the guy and you know his work, that's a different story. But if it's somebody you met at Home Depot, "Oh yeah, I do this on the side, and yeah, I'll take half down," and you don't sign anything and you don't have any information, you
Yeah.
probably won't see them again. It's
Right.
unfortunate.
No, it's true. I think the biggest thing that I see with those frustrating subcontractors is actually not that they're malicious or they're trying to take advantage of people, but I find that they are not good at estimates or gauging their time. And so what
Yeah,
happens is they ultimately give you a good price because they underbid what they can do. And now you give them the money and they know that it's going to be so much longer. Halfway through the job, they're like, oh crap, this is so
yep,
much more work. And now they know they're not going to get paid till the end. So they need cash flow. So then they have to hold off on your job because they
yep,
have to go start another job to get more
yep.
cash. And so there's this terrible loop. And they mean well. They're really nice people. They do. But
But like I
they,
said, the details of running a business.
yeah, they don't know how to do this. So a lot of times that underpriced job is never a good deal because they're not going to come back and finish it. They're going to be forced to either lose money or cut corners. And I just it's so common in the industry that it's you got to be aware of it.
Right. No, and it happens, like you said, as a perfect example. They got to go do another job to pay for this job, and then they compromise quality, and then the schedule that you won't see them for 2 or 3 weeks. They won't return your calls or nothing, or they'll have a story every time you talk to them. That's the other thing with contractors is if they get back to you right away and they're very responsive in communicating, that's a really good sign. It's the guys that, "Oh, I'm so busy." Well, then if you're so busy, how will I know you do even do a good job?
Yeah.
And so you gotta read between the lines with some of this stuff. And that
Yeah.
just comes from experience, unfortunately,
Like,
because you should be the priority and you should be the most important person, even though they may have 3 other jobs when they're there, that your priority, not, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy to get there today." It's like, well, okay, you know, that's obviously time management issue on that guy's part. And so
yeah.
then I'll send some guys over there this week, you
Hmm.
know, and they never
Right.
show up, or it's 2 different guys. And you're going to find out real fast when the project starts how this goes. And
Mhm.
then you're finding it all the way through.
I like
So,
to have them where you give them that first half down the day they start instead of ahead of
yep,
time, because
yep.
then they start showing up and doing the work and they get it moving.
Hmm.
Because it's been too many times where we've worked with subs and you give them their half down and then they're like, oh
It
yeah,
takes
I'll
you two
get to
weeks.
it, you know? They'll
Hmm.
bother you to get the deposit, and as soon as they get it, they like ghost you for 2 or 3 weeks, and you're just constantly trying to get at them. Not, but just in general, like
Yeah.
it's so
And I mean, and
frustrating.
like they say, friends and family, they have the best intentions, but most time than not, they're the ones that are most frustrating to work with, you know, because if they're doing it for a deal or a favor, you got to see what, their invested interest in it. It's like, I need it done now, not in 3 months.
Yeah.
And so then there becomes this weird awkwardness in the relationship,
Yeah.
and you're just frustrated because they said they're going to do it, but of course they're not getting paid, or they're only getting paid a little bit, covering materials and doing all the labor, and because you're trying to save money. And so sometimes it's easier to steer clear of friends and
Yeah.
family.
Just from like perspective, just if your dogs are $3,000 and you're trying to save $6,000, that's only two puppies.
Right.
Put it in perspective and think about, is it worth two more puppies to have this done 3 months earlier? I remember there was a time when I was struggling so much with Giardia that they weren't necessarily dying from it, but it was just such a bad impression.
Right.
And having the new facilities prevented me from having all those conversations with buyers who were struggling when they went home, because they would be sort of fine when they left. But then, of course, the stress of the move, and then it pops back up. And so it just made
Mhm.
such a difference. And it allowed me to have a much more honest program.
Which is nice, because then you're moving forward versus trying to sidestep and sidetrack, and
Yeah.
and you get everything in alignment and move. And like I said, you can build the facility piece by piece. You could save up, build a little bit, however it works, but in the end, it's the cohesiveness of it all, and it's nice because then you can just lay that to rest and move on to your next big thing and focus your energy elsewhere. Because I know with most people, when you have something going on, you're constantly thinking about it and engaging in it with your imagination, and then you're creating all these scenarios in your head, and you're stressing yourself out, and then you're dealing with the real life aspect of things. And if I would have just did this in the beginning, or if I would have just saved the money over the course of 3 months and just built it all at once and went with this guy versus trying to get the deal
Yeah.
and save $1,000, and I've had bids for labor on stuff where I'll supply materials, and I know what costs are. I've had people tell me some of the most ridiculous numbers, and some of my customers that I went to do jobs for, they're like, wow, the last guy that did this, did it, I'm not even talking close apples to apple. Like, it's so far out there. I'm like, how do you even throw a bid out like that? And
Yeah.
so the industry's changed a lot. And depending on where you're at, it's worse in some areas, but I'm seeing it just throughout the United States with construction guys. You're
Yeah.
seeing generations of the guys with the craft and really know how to run the businesses. They're tired of it. They're closing businesses or retiring. The new generations coming up, new guys in charge, they lack so much experience and understanding on running a business, how to do the jobs, how to facilitate. It's just becoming a nightmare out there because
Well,
of
you
it.
have to, I
So
think it's just they're out there. Good contractors are out there, but
there's
you
real good
gotta
ones out
take the
there.
time, you gotta find them and be willing to pay a little bit more. It's not usually much. I would say,
Well,
probably the slightly better one is going to be 15, maybe 20% more at
yeah,
worst. And it's reasonable. It's actually what the job's generally worth. But it's worth the headache and getting what you want.
you pay for the experience, and you usually pay for what you get in construction. And it's like that in most places, but it's more so than not anymore with the
Yeah.
guys in construction. You see a lot of new guys popping up at Home Depot, do it yourselfers, and because they couldn't get paid enough where they were, so now they're doing it. It's just not the same. It's unfortunate because everybody looks at the guy pulling up in the bed, with a pickup and tools, like, oh, he's just looking for beer money, and it's like, it's not like that. It really isn't, so and then the
Yeah.
guy pulls up in the super nice brand new truck. It's like, whoa, how much is this guy gonna cost me? So I mean,
Yeah.
appearance, all these little factors play into it, and how they approach you. Are they salesmen, or are they actually, they got dirty jeans on and boots, or are they just holy and
Yeah.
scraggly looking, and like truck's like 30 years old. I mean, not trying to be judgmental, but this is really how it works out there. Big companies are going to charge more because they have more overhead. It's as simple as that. And so there's a fine line in there.
Yeah, it's definitely worth, yeah, there's a sweet spot for everyone. But it's worth taking the time to find it.
Mm-hmm. That's the real world in construction. I'm not, I've been doing this decades, so it's pretty much what it is, unfortunately.
This is true. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm
That's
good.
good.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks so
Appreciate it.
much for coming on. It was good to have you. I know people finally want to meet you. And
It was a pleasure.
all right. I'll see you in the kitchen.
Okay,
Right.
sounds good. Bye.
If you found this episode helpful, please tap that like button. It helps me better understand you and supports the channel. If you're a current or aspiring dog breeder, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks.